Well, we are live on Amazon and a couple other places, but honestly, if you are watching anywhere other than Amazon Live, come over to amazonlive.com and join me and Holly Jean Jackson. And before we get started, I have to read something to people because normally when you do a book interview, uh, you go from the beginning to the end. When you read a book, you go from the beginning to the end. Today, we're going to start right at the end. We're going to give the big reveal because that's the way today is. It's Friday, it's the end of the week. So let's start with the end. You deserve a life of health. You deserve a life of vitality. You deserve a life of success. You deserve the life of your dreams. Take action today. You've got this. Holly Jean Jackson, welcome. We've got your book, Inspiration Contagion.
Yes, thanks for having me. And I do mean that. You do deserve it. And I feel like people maybe right now need to be reminded of that message and be reminded that you can get that. It just takes these small baby steps to get there. So thanks for having me,
Indeed.
Scott.
Hey, it is an honor and a pleasure to have you here, Holly. We've known each other for a while. We do some work together. In fact, in the carousel, people will find a book that we have written together with Matt Rouse, but that's something we'll talk about later on, maybe a little bit. But first of all, let's go ahead and have you introduce yourself and tell people what's going on in Holly's world. And let's start there.
Great. So my name's Holly Jean Jackson. I am a holistic business coach. What that means is that I work with health and wellness business owners and entrepreneurs on scaling their business to that next level from a holistic approach, both with coaching and consulting. I am also the Inspiration Contagion podcast host, which came before this first book of 3. So this is the first of 3 Inspiration Contagion books. So stay tuned. Very exciting stuff. I'm also the co-host of the Business Builder Throwdown show, which I do with this awesome guy on the screen here with me pointing the wrong direction, and with Matt Rouse. And we have a beautiful mastermind called Business Builder Ninjas. What's going on in my world? I've been really busy. Yes, the ninja. I've been really, really busy promoting the book and promoting our mastermind and keeping my clients super happy.
So it's awesome. I think you and Matt Rouse, and so yourself, Matt Rouse, and I were able to collaborate on the book and on isolation, the health and wellness business killer. I just highlighted it in the carousel there. And when I talked to you and Matt, I think for some reason they're on that time zone that you guys live in. Matt's a little hour ahead. I think you've got more than 24 hours a day because you accomplish a lot in your days.
Yeah, well, with Matt up in Nova Scotia, sometimes I wonder if he's got like the Santa Claus effect. And so like time stands still because he gets crazy amounts done and he's written so many books and his business is just skyrocketing, which is incredible. And I think for me, I don't know, because I've lived on the West Coast and got just as much done. So I don't think it's a special location. I think it's just having that compass of what you're going after and feeling really inspired consistently to take action against that. And then I think it also helps that I don't have little ones at home right now. And so that gives me a little more time in the day.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny too because you talk about, and I know you do other work with Matt as well, and you've got other partners and you do stuff on your own. But it is Jim Rohn, the consultant, who says you are the sum of the five people you spend the most time with. And so when you spend time with people like Matt, who get a lot done, who write books in very short periods of time, it rubs off on you. And so just encouraging people, decide who you want to be like and make sure you're hanging out with people that represent that ideal. And we'll talk a little bit more about networks and kind of all that later as we kind of go through the book. And one of the things that you and I also share in common is a love of hiking and backpacking. And your book, and I'm going to highlight that right here in the carousel. Uh, all of this is available, by the way. If you go to amazon.com/live, you can join us here. We have a chat. There's a chat here. You can ask questions of Holly, and you can click on her book. You can add it to cart, and we'll talk about why you might want to do that. But books make great gifts. And maybe there's someone you forgot at Christmas time. Maybe there's somebody whose birthday is coming up. Maybe there's someone that you just like, and that person could be yourself. Add Holly's cart, the book to your cart, and get it. You can get it in the format that you want. If you want paperback, if you want Kindle, and eventually, Holly is going to do an Audible version. I think is that part of the plan.
It is part of the plan. Yes. I can't promise on when it will be coming out because I'm going to record it myself. The stories are very personal, so it felt appropriate that I should read the book. So,
Mhm.
as time allows, I will let you guys know when it's a ready in audio format. But on what Scott was sharing with the gift thing, if you know somebody who's feeling hopeless, they're trying to improve their health, or maybe they're running a business, but they're burning the candle at both ends. This is a great gift because it has really, really small, tangible steps you can take and a really solid toolkit that's very simple to implement. And you can kind of choose whatever chapter you want to start on, wherever you're having the most challenges. It's set up as, choose your own adventure. So it's a great way to remind somebody they're not alone and that there are tools that work.
It's one of the things that is I was reading your book, and it it really reminded me more of a manual in a way, something that you might dog ear some different things, put some post-it notes in there, put your notes in, make your personal comments, and then refer back to it on occasion. I mentioned that we both enjoy backpacking. I highlighted something in the carousel. People can take a look, but you've got this beautiful map, very Tolkien-esque, I will say. I love the map there. It's one of those things that kind of captures your attention. Can you talk a little bit about the map? And then I'm going to talk about why I've highlighted this particular item in the carousel.
Yeah, so the map actually, it's really interesting when you hire an artist to develop artwork for your book. The first thing that they ask you is, well, can you share an example of what it is that it's going to look like? And there wasn't anything in existence for it, so you should have seen. I had to draw out what I wanted. It was so ugly because I mean I'm somewhat of an artist, but I didn't want to waste a lot of time when I was hiring somebody to make it beautiful. But I found somebody on Fiverr that did these amazing, amazing, beautiful pieces of art. And that's who I ended up hiring. So I sketched it out. I had just this idea, this vision of, we're talking about how healing's an internal job. And we're talking about all the different elements and aspects that come into that. And so the map was kind of like if you've read Colette Barron's book, she has a book called The Map, and she talks about these different landscapes that we experience. And so I wanted to have kind of that same design across these different chapters. So if sleep is your biggest challenge, you could start with the sleep landscape and dive into that chapter. And because we have campfire as this theme, which we'll talk about a little bit later, going throughout the book, I have little campfires at each of the little stations in the map. So it's like you can decide which campsite you want to visit and get started at.
Love it. I love it. And when we started off today here on Amazon Live with Holly Jean Jackson, and her book is highlighted in there. But there's an item highlighted in the carousel right now. And as I said, I started at the end. Let's go right back to the beginning. I am not ready to die. This is the opening sentence to your book. I am not ready to die. Um, when people write books, when they read books, they want something they can relate to. And I would believe that everybody can relate to this right away, right? Right from the very beginning. I am not ready to die. Why did you say that?
So this
And
is
and and let's talk about this because they have bear spray highlighted in the carousel. And now people will know why we have that. Go ahead.
yeah, so when Scott and I were collaborating about what to put in the carousel, we got really creative because we like to have fun with our shows. So we hope you're having
Right.
fun as you're tuning in. Add your comments and questions as we kind of share stories along the way because we want you to be engaged and involved here. So that story, we start at the peak of the story in that chapter. And I had decided to go backpacking alone in the woods because I was working on this piece of step study around codependency after my divorce. And I was getting hung up on the spiritual inventory part of it, which is this
Mhm.
really deep reflective process. And I knew that the only way I'd get it done is if I was alone without any distractions. Also, I wanted to see how I would do dealing with my own mental chatter alone. Honestly, that was like scarier than going backpacking alone. What's ironic and relevant to the the bear spray in the cart is that people that I loved when I said, "Hey, I'm going to do this trip," they were like, "You're crazy and you need to bring some bear spray with you, and I'm really worried. Tell me when you're back safely." And I said, "Oh, I don't need bear spray. I've been backpacking before. It's not a big deal." So I went to Lassen National Park, went on this beautiful 3-day trip by myself. And the first day was magical. The second day, I camped at this campsite on the lake, and it was probably around afternoon, 1 o'clock. And I hadn't really seen people all day except for this one campsite downstream. And all of a sudden, the guys at this campsite started shouting at me. And I'm like, "Hey guys, what's up?" And they kept shouting. And finally, I understood that they were saying there's a bear. And so I saw the bear on the sandbar. So there's a sandbar here, I'm here, and the guys are further downstream on the lake. And the bear had not seen me yet. So I used my bear awareness skills and didn't turn my back to the bear, but backed away to the campsite where these guys were. And then the bear started to proceed towards my campsite. So I said, "Hey guys, can you help me get my stuff?" So we grabbed some pots and pans and we're clanging them, making noise, grab my stuff. And I set up camp with these guys. We had some great conversation over the campfire, and they were sharing about a book they were writing. It was amazing. It was great meeting these guys. But they were also sharing how this bear was very unusual. So the next morning over coffee, and over a campfire, we're talking, and they said, "Okay, we're going the separate direction from you. This is my last day. I was hiking back to my car. We want to teach you how to charge bear because when we came across that bear on the trail, we had to charge her, and this is not normal." And I said, "I didn't even know you could charge a bear. How do you do that?" So the guys show me over coffee how to charge a bear. And so you take one step forward, make yourself really big, and you go "Rawr," really loud, right? So then we go our separate ways, say our goodbyes. And I start hiking, and the trail gets more and more lush. You can't see around the corners as it winds through the woods. And I look down, and there's fresh paw prints and a second smaller set of paw prints. As soon as I noticed this, I got goosebumps, and I was just, my
Mhm.
fear was so heightened because I knew I was in the wrong place. And she was upset because she was out there with her cub. So I turned the next corner, and there's Mama Bear.
Mm.
She just immediately starts charging at me. My life flashes before my eyes. And interestingly enough, the thoughts that went through my head were like, "Oh, I'm in a great place if I die right now because I've journaled all this forgiveness. I feel peaceful. I'm good." But then I remembered, I didn't come out there to be bear food. I had big things I wanted to accomplish. And I remember what the guys told me. And so I charged her back. So I took that step forward, and it took all of the courage in my body, and I, back at the bear. And I had to do this twice. Luckily, the second time I did it, it worked, and she walked away. Now, the reason I share this story is not that you're likely to have the same experience, because it's not that common, but it's because we all face bears in our lives. Perhaps your bear today is starting a business you've been thinking about for years, but you're scared. Perhaps it's leaving a relationship that no longer serves you. Perhaps it's shifting careers so that you find more balance at home. But I'm here to tell you that if I can face an actual bear in the woods, there's no bear too big in your life that you cannot charge head on. And in doing so, you will experience freedom and clarity on the other side.
Mhm. Yeah, it's so true. Very few of us have faced bears. Fortunately, I have not had to chase a bear, chase after a bear, or face down a bear. We were mountain biking in Whistler, and as we were riding the gondola up the day before to kind of scout things out, I did see a bear, a little mama bear down there. And the next day, as we were riding downhill, and one of the guys had a flat tire, and I had been telling him about this bear that I saw, and one of the guys had a flat tire. Well, this is in the days before disc brakes on mountain bikes, so it was a rim brakes, those caliper brakes. His rims were burning hot because we've been going downhill, and we had to cool off the rim before we could change the tire, change the tube out. And sure enough, about 50 yards away, the bushes start jiggling, and I make his offhanded comment, "Yeah, it's probably that bear." Well, it was. We didn't mind the heat of the rim. We got the tire fixed and moved on. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's not something you want to face. But for those people who are, as you said, looking at changes, job changes, just routine changes. Obviously, these last 2 years, people's lives have been disrupted significantly. Jobs, companies, families, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of bears, I will say, that people are facing.
There are a lot of bears, and it feels like because of the times we're in, it's kind of like we're facing bears, and there's this pressure cooker that's just,
Mm,
condensing things. And then on top of that, there's all this isolation and separation. So that's why I felt like this book was so important to write, was
mhm.
to give people that light and that hope instead of all the fear and the darkness that we're hearing in the news. So it's trying to combat that. I mean, it's one book, but that was the
Uh,
whole goal behind it.
yeah. And as we kind of, as we go through the book, there's another important point that you bring up, and we'll kind of go through and give people a little bit of a highlight. We are talking. Just remind everybody, we are talking with Holly Jean Jackson, author of the new book, Inspiration Contagion. These are health secrets for raving success. And I love that it's raving success. The book is in the carousel, and it's an extension of the Inspiration Contagion podcast, which you can also subscribe to. You can click on it right here in the carousel. Um, as I was reading the book, one of the things that again stands out is defining success for yourself and avoiding comparison. Because when we compare ourselves to others, there's no way to win, right? I mean, we will always lose when it comes to comparison.
Yeah. Well, and this is really interesting, particularly right now, because people aren't coming together physically as much over the last couple of years. And so people are tuning more into social media, or, looking at statistics and stories out there. And so it's really hard not to fall into that compare and despair mode. And I know, particularly with entrepreneurs and business owners, even when you're networking with people that are extremely successful, and like Scott was saying, you want to surround yourself with people that are at the level you want to be. But it's easy, even with that, to come into this whole compare and despair. So,
Mhm.
there's this jealousy thing, or this, oh, they have this, I don't. And so that's why it's really important to get clear on what success is for you, because it helps you have a better grounding and foundation of how you define success, because it's likely not the same definition that everybody else has. And I would say, of all of the over 60 people and leaders that I've interviewed on the podcast, none of them, it's not just about money. In terms of the
Mhm.
money, it's like they need the finances and resources to do the things that are important for their family, for their loved ones, and with the change that they're leaving and their legacy they're building. But it's not really about that. For them, success is living their legacy. It's being of service to other people. It's helping heal the world. It's being a good parent and having a very specific defined legacy of what they want their children to remember them for. So when we step back and we define success on our own terms, we stop allowing the corporate companies and your boss to define success. We stop trying to, follow these other ladders that we're climbing from our parents, from mentors, from leaders. You have to stop and step back to define that on your own
Mhm.
terms, or you're constantly going to be chasing something that's not going to make you happy.
Absolutely. And, it's funny because when you talk about defining success, and often we look at it in terms of money because it's measurable. I had an economics professor, and he had this great phrase. He said, "Scott, I don't like money, but I do like what money can do." So if it's, it is as you said, it's just a tool. It's to help you get something accomplished. And I worked with this lady, single mom, and it was just her and her daughter. She had a couple of businesses that she was running. And to her, she said, I define success as being able to pay my bills and not wince. Right? And it was
Yeah.
just she said, like, "Hey, the electric bill comes in, it's winter, it might be $300." She's like, "Okay, I just write the check," and it's not she didn't worry about it. Now, success could also mean, spending $5,000 for her and her daughter to spend, 3 weeks in Hawaii, right? I mean, that's for her, success, right? You're defining it, but define it for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, and for me, success is when I show up in my own energy, grounded in the values I stand for, and when I'm able to step into my long-term legacy from an inspired standpoint, showing generosity, being of service to others, and creating that ripple effect in the world. And
Mhm,
of course, I have financial goals and other things that layer on beneath that, but it's not about that. And if anything, my financial goals are more about my longer term goal of funding a nonprofit for kids. So
mhm,
it's not even about what I need. It's like, oh, this longer term thing. And so
mhm,
what's really fascinating to me is when you talk to these amazing, inspiring people that have these incredible legacies, their definition of success is very different and really
mhm.
interesting.
Yeah, I love that. Now, again, we mentioned that in your book, you talk about some very personal stories, and it was the bear story is your story, and it's got a great application. Not quite as personal, but very exciting. It's a great way to enter. But you do talk about some health issues, and this is one of the things that, and I just want to remind people that when you meet somebody, even if you think you know them, you may not know everything. You might not know the whole backstory. And with that, not a pun intended, you have your own backstory.
That was good. Yeah, the backstory, pun intended. Yeah. Well, it's really interesting you bring that up because for a long time I struggled with sharing my stories of my health because if you read the whole book, there's a chapter on dealing with chronic pain, and there's
Mhm,
this very difficult balance and dance you do when you experience chronic pain for your whole life, or you manage pain your whole life. If you start talking about it too much, it becomes too much of a focal point, right? So when I started writing the book in the past, I didn't wasn't successful because it was life stealing. But when I reframed it to be inspirational, it was so much easier. And so I will not lie, the book was difficult to write because there's some very
mhm,
raw, painful stories that you revisit. So in terms of the backstory, when I was in my teenage years, I started having these really interesting back problems, and my parents thought I had terrible posture. They're like, Holly, sit up straight. And I'm like, I am sitting up straight, I promise. And then, in my 20s, I was married at the time, and I started having really significant back pain. I had a car accident that made it worse. And then I went to clinic after clinic and specialist after specialist for 4 years without any answers. And I'm talking about searing nerve pain around the clock that would not go away. So you can imagine if you have that kind of debilitating pain, it's hard to think, it's hard to like be yourself. You get kind of irritated, you can't sleep. So it puts you like not in a very good place. So eventually, I finally found a specialist who said, "Oh, you have something called degenerative disc disease." And honestly, what was great was at least I had an answer. I wasn't
Mhm.
crazy. So for people that are hearing this and you have a health ailment or something that's painful and you feel crazy because it's like you have this pain but it's invisible, nobody can see it. That's the challenge with pain is just because they can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So when you get that
Mhm.
answer and they're like validating those feelings, it's this relief. It's like exciting that you have an answer. But sadly, the answer was surgery. And so they recommended fusing 10 levels of my spine from T3
Mm.
to L1, which is your neck to where your lumbar spine begins. So I went through with the surgery because at this point, I didn't feel like I had any options. And they said that if I didn't, I would eventually go into organ failure, and a lot of other scary things. So I had the
Wow.
surgery.
And this was like 4 hours or I mean,
Yeah, it was, probably 4 or 5-hour surgery because they
yeah.
have to break the spine, put 2 rods and
Mm,
screws and drill them back into the spine to reposition it so that it was originally 72 degrees curved to
man.
30. Um,
Just gives me the willies thinking about that.
I went through it and it gives me the willies, so,
Yeah. It
and
was tough.
then
It was a tough chapter to read, tough part to read.
it was a tough part to go through. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, so after that, I would like to say that that surgery fixed the problem. It fixed the nerve
Mhm.
pain, but it took me years. Like I was addicted to muscle relaxants and not strong painkillers, but like, Motrin and ibuprofen for a couple of years. And it took a close friend of mine being really brave and showing some tough love. And she
There
said,
is a
"Holly, yeah,
yeah. You have lost yourself.
yes." Yeah,
Yeah.
so I lost myself, and when she called me out on it, initially, I was just denying it, really angry, but then when I stepped back and really thought about it, I was like, "She's right," and that was what I needed to hear, and then I went on this journey of how to fix it and how to get off the meds, how to, like, not let pain take over my life, and so that's how I developed the tools around that, and it's ongoing. I cannot tell you I'm pain-free. It takes a whole team of people and a lot of work for me to reduce my pain level.
And we'll talk a little too about the self-care. And I just wanna remind everybody, we are talking with the author, Holly Jean Jackson. She is a holistic business coach. She has written this book, Inspiration Contagion: Health Secrets for Raving Success. It has just come out. It is on Amazon, it's on Kindle. You can get the paperback book like this. Beautiful book, well written, great stories, and there's practical tips in here. This is not just a Holly's journey, which is fascinating, and I think a lot of people will be able to relate to this. But there's a lot of practical steps, even early in the book, and certainly later in the book, where you provide some very practical advice. And y- y- as I've mentioned before, we share backpacking and hiking as a common interest. And I want to talk about one of the chapters you have, and I just highlighted in there in the carousel one of the items for backpacking or camping or just getting out and going to the beach is a hammock. Why? Because you have an entire chapter on sleep. This is my hammock. This travels with me. It fits in this little bag. I get these little straps. I got these straps from Home Depot. Ooh. No, I got them from Amazon. These straps that you can, like tie down straps. I take them with me. I was uh, a summer ago. We were down in Southern California. I was at the Santa Monica Pier, and underneath the boardwalk there, under the piers, uh, under the pilings. I put my hammock up, and I tell you, there's nothing more cool than being at Santa Monica Pier, laying in your hammock and just relaxing and reading. But let's talk about sleep. You have an
Yeah.
entire chapter dedicated to sleep.
Yeah, well, and it's funny because Scott and I, preparing for this, discovered we have more in common than we realized. So we have the same hammock. I love
Mhm.
taking my hammock. I use cordelette because we do climbing, and so might use the rope and cordelette and just go
Perfect.
random places. And I would argue Mammoth Lake is an even more magical place to set up your hammock and watch the constellations as the sun goes down. But anyhow, there is a whole chapter on sleep because it's something I struggled with for many years.
Mhm.
Since I was a teenager, I had insomnia. And, I want to say it was 7 or 8 years ago, I read Matthew's book on why we sleep. And so a lot of the tips in there are from his book, and that's referenced. It's not like stolen from his book, but I'm referencing some of the toolkits and guides, and I quote him in there because what that book did for me was profound. It really made me realize that sleep was the foundation of everything. And when you don't get sleep, you aren't able to focus, you start to get jittery, you're not able to show up emotionally in a very good way because when we're sleeping, when we have that REM dream sleep, it's actually our brain trying to process things that have happened that day so we can show up emotionally to connect and solve problems. And so oftentimes when I'm sleeping, I solve problems. So if I have a
Mhm.
client that has a problem, sometimes my dreams are kind of exhausting because I have this weird dream when I'm solving problems, like monsters, the
Mhm.
monster movie, and all the doors that
Mhm.
they go through.
Yep.
My doors are all of the options for solving problems for clients, and it's all night long. It's exhausting. It's like, okay, can we move on? But also, when we're sleeping, when we get deep sleep, so this is that physical restorative sleep where your body's not
Mhm.
moving, it's healing physical ailments and it's helping with things that are creating pain and inflammation in your body. And so there are a lot of strategies that helped me fix my insomnia. And that's not to say I don't have flare ups, but they're maybe once or twice a year and it maybe lasts
Mhm.
3 days. This was like really bad all the time. But the biggest thing I want you to take away from this is our society doesn't value sleep. And that's because there wasn't research and science to show how important it was until very recently. So what I don't want you to do is stress out about the fact that you're not getting more sleep because then you're just going to like not be able to sleep. You're going to be like, "Oh my gosh." And that's what I did when I read that book. I was like, "I need to get more sleep," and then I'm freaking out about sleep. What I want you to do is just recognize you want to start moving slowly towards more sleep. And the chapter
Mhm.
has very specific, easy steps you could do to start getting towards more sleep.
Yeah, you've got some practical tips in there, and one of the things that we found out from the research on sleep is that the lack of sleep, sleep deprivation, has the same effect as intoxication.
Yeah.
And so people would never show up to work drunk,
They do
and
it all the
yet
time and don't realize it.
and yet they will short themselves on sleep and show up, and they're operating heavy equipment, they're making good decisions, they're putting people's in their own lives at risk, they're putting the company at risk by making poor decisions. And I know there's some stories in there that you've mentioned about uh, things that happened and you didn't realize happened, conversations that you had, and I know there's a lot of cumulative stuff going on there, but uh, sleep is important. We should put an alarm clock in the carousel. A friend of mine was asking. He posted on Facebook. He says, "I need an aggressive alarm clock." And there's all kinds of things with bells and buzzers and klaxons and lights and flashing whirly things, whatever. My comment was, you need an alarm clock that makes you go to bed 7 or 8 hours before you want to get up.
Yeah, if you need that many alarms to get up, you're not getting anywhere close to enough sleep. Like, there's actually a quiz in the book, and one of the questions is if you need an alarm clock to get up in the morning, you're not getting enough sleep. So,
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's so important. And one other thing I just want to say on sleep before we leave that is
Mhm.
people think that they're getting sleep when they take sleep aids.
Mm,
That's demystified in this chapter because even natural sleep aids, there's danger in that because then your body stops producing that hormone naturally. So you don't want to get a dependence even on natural supplements. So melatonin, it's fine to use when you're changing time zones from time to time, but consistent use of that can actually make it difficult for your body to produce that naturally. And then in terms of sleeping pills, you're fooling yourself if you think that's sleep. That is
mhm,
just knocking yourself out. It's not giving you
mhm,
REM or deep sleep. And also, there are mortality rates that are pretty daunting related to sleeping pills, only if you take 6 to 12 pills a year. And
mhm.
people that are hooked on sleeping pills are taking a lot more than that. And I mean, it's like something between 30 and 50% increased rate of death by taking sleeping pills. It's pretty
Wow.
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's, as your brain's working and those neurotransmitters are firing off, there's little bits of residue, from those transmitters as they go off. And so it builds up in your brain. And one of the things that happens when we sleep is your body naturally flushes this residue out. If you can think of it, it's brain poop. You've got just poop hanging out there, there's residue,
I
and
like
you need
that.
to sleep to clean out the brain poop. And and this is where a nap too. Sometimes we need those, and even the 10-minute power nap, which works well for me, 10 minutes, let my brain go, clean the brain poop out, and man, I can think so much more clearly.
Yeah. No,
And
so yesterday I was feeling really tired. I actually had some insomnia this last week for a few nights. Just had some things that were triggering me, my thought process. And I was like, I recognized what was happening, but none of my tools were working. And so yesterday I was starting to feel like, oh, I'm getting sick. So I stopped pushing through the day, rejiggered my schedule, and I took a 30-minute nap and it was
Mm,
magical. I woke up, I felt 100% better. I didn't feel sick anymore. And then I was able to get a good night's sleep that night to break that cycle. And so it's the simple, tiny things like
mhm.
stop resisting what your body's telling you it needs. And that's what the book is all about.
Now you've got some great tips in there about habits and routine, and just so people understand, habits are things that are triggered. You do it in response to something. Routines are things that you do essentially the same thing in the same order at the same time. So before I go to bed, I brush my teeth, then I get into bed, and then I read, and then I fall asleep. And so there's consistency in routine. And you have some great tips in there for this as well.
Yeah, so there's a little bit around bedtime routine. So, one of the challenges people have around getting enough sleep is the mental chatter that starts. So, even if you go to bed reading a book, as soon as you try to go to sleep, if you haven't dealt with that mental chatter and quieted the thoughts in your head, you're not going to be able to fall asleep for quite some time, if at all. And so the bedtime routine is about, having less light around you, doing specific things to help you kind of wind down, unplugging from Wi Fi and your phone, disconnecting,
Mhm,
not having these bright lights that don't allow your brain to actually reduce the hormones necessarily to get sleepy. So there's quite a few things in modern times that make it difficult, and it's like our body resisting being able to fall asleep. And there's simple things you can do in your bedtime routine to fix that. And you can even involve the family and start a family bedtime routine of unplugging, unwinding. You could do family yoga. You could do a gratitude check in with the family and, disconnect from Wi Fi and TV and read together.
mhm. Yeah, it was, Simon Sinek, and many people, are familiar with his book, Start With Why, or his, TEDx talk from Puget Sound a number of years ago, How Great Leaders Inspire. And one of the things that he has talked about for years is, he's saying, "Stop using your cell phone as your alarm clock." And taking it into the bedroom with you. And I remember hearing that and thinking, that's not me. I'm okay. But I tell you what, 3 years ago, actually, it was January 3 years ago, I stopped. I said, you know what? My phone is not going to be my alarm clock. I went down to Goodwill, spent like $1.99, bought a used electric alarm clock or battery powered alarm clock, which I still use, and stopped taking my phone to bed. And what happened is uh, I had stopped reading, because what I do is I get into bed and I'm just scrolling through the feeds, Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever. Um, and when I stopped doing that, I went back to reading books like Inspiration Contagion, The Health Secrets for Raving Success by Holly Jean Jackson, here on Amazon Live. The book is in the carousel, and make sure that
And
you
by
guys.
the way, if people don't wanna get rid of their phone as their alarm, you can put it on, airplane mode and do not disturb, so you're not,
There you go.
pulled into it. You're just using it for the functionality, and you're not waking up first thing in the morning, reading emails and pulling into social media. You can start with a morning routine of
But
some meditation.
I will advocate. You're on Amazon. Just put alarm clock, battery alarm clock into the search. Get yourself an alarm clock. You're talking like $5 or $6.
Yeah,
Just
actually, as you said that, I'm like,
just
maybe I
change
should
your
try that. I wanna
just do
experiment
it.
with that. Yeah,
Yeah,
just do it.
spend the $6. And uh we'll talk some more about camping later. So I was just thinking about some stuff. Self-care. This is the other thing you talk about, because, there's some startling research in your book that talks about stress that we're experiencing. And this is not pandemic related. It may have been intensified or some focus brought to it, but the stress in people's lives is real and frightening.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing too is I read a lot and I listen to a lot of Audible books and I love to nerd out on health. Otherwise, I wouldn't have all this information to even write this. But when we look at our brains, they haven't changed that much since caveman times. So what that means is we have this permanent negativity bias. We only
Mm,
see the negative, and that's there for our survival originally. But in modern times, what this means is that even when we have good stressors in our life, like we're trying to make sure our kids are successful, we're, launching a book, all of these things are still stress. And so our brain can't differentiate what that means.
mhm,
Stress to our brain is essentially the same as a lion threatening our lives. So you compare that to an email your boss sends you that stresses you out, your brain is responding to those two triggers exactly the same way. And so you have to use these tools to stop having the brain release cortisol. You kind of have to trick your brain, that
mhm.
caveman monkey brain of ours that is still there. So that once you're aware of this, there are tools you can use and they're in the book. There's a whole stress and anxiety toolkit. And so for me, if I'm in traffic and somebody almost hits me and I can feel the cortisol rushing through my body, or I have a
Sure.
fight with somebody and I can feel it, the first thing I do is I stop and I start doing straw breathing for at least 1 minute. So you're
Mm,
inhaling deeply, you're pursing your lips together, blowing out like you're blowing through a straw. What this
mm,
does is it only takes 1 minute of being calm, which is your exhale is longer than your inhale because when we're stressed, we start raising our shoulders, or our breath gets shallow. If you deepen that exhale for a minute, it tricks your brain into thinking it's safe and calm.
mm.
And that's all it takes is 1 minute. That's all. And so every time you start feeling stressed out, that's all you need to do. But then there's also a lot of other tools we have in there so that if that doesn't work for you, you've got lots of options to pick from.
Again, I just want to encourage everybody, get a copy of Inspiration Contagion. In fact, buy multiple copies. Get one sent to yourself. Get on Kindle. Get the paperback book, whatever works for you. But Holly Jean Jackson has great tips here. We're just talking about some of the things that you can do about handling stress. Everybody's got stress of some sort. I talk about cortisol being released into the body, and this is a chemical that helps you store fat, because when your body was stressed, you may not get food, And so your body said, well, we're going to save some of the energy that we have. And so in today's world, we probably don't need that. Uh, but it happens. It's a natural thing. And so learn how to deal with it. And if there's somebody that you know that could benefit from this, uh, the great thing about Amazon is you can just type their name in the address and have this book sent directly to them. You can be the hero sending them a copy of the new book, Inspiration Contagion. And this is Health Secrets for Raving Success. Holly's natural or her story is just going to naturally engage you uh, and bring you in. But there's practical tips. And we are just talking about some of these things like breathing and self care and let's talk about the other self, and that is self-talk, because
Yeah.
this is eh, also really hard for people.
Yeah, yeah. And so, one of the biggest challenges when I'm working with my clients and also for fixing myself, and this is an ongoing journey, right? So, one of the things we struggle with, and you might not even be aware you're doing it, is how we talk to ourselves. And so it's really interesting when something comes up and you feel like a failure or you mess up, you make a mistake. If you actually listen to the dialogue in your head, for most people, it's pretty negative. It's pretty toxic. It's something you wouldn't even say to your worst enemy. And so the sooner we can become aware of that and start getting curious and shifting it. So don't freak out if you're doing that. Like that's not going to help. Just be like, that's interesting. Okay, that's where that's going because awareness is that first step. But when you start diving into how you talk to yourself, one of the tools that can be helpful is okay, how would I talk to my best friend? So reframe it. If you're doing this kind of toxic trash talk to yourself, be like, what would my best friend tell me? And listen to that. Replace that negative self talk with what your best friend would say to you. Hopefully, you have a good best friend and they're encouraging you, they're cheerleading you on. They're saying, check out this resource. You're not a failure. I believe in you, right? You're shifting that
Mhm,
talk. But the book also goes into limiting beliefs, which is even deeper than our self talk. We have limiting beliefs around money, success, our family, who we belong to, like how we see love, if we deserve love. And so
mhm.
there are tools for identifying your limiting beliefs and how to start transforming them. And all the things in the book are related. So your self talk, if it's negative, it's affecting your sleep. And if your self talk is negative, your stress is going to be even higher because when you get stressed out, your talk is going to be super negative.
Mhm.
So they're all interrelated and interwoven.
There's a really great quote by Henry Ford that says, "Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right."
Exactly. And so
And
I'm here to tell
so,
everybody
yes.
here, you can, you're worth it. We started this whole thing off with that quote that you deserve the life of your
I was just
dreams.
it was funny because I was just pulling this back up. I wanna reread this section from the Inspiration Contagion. It's the end of the book, and it says, "You deserve a life of health. You deserve a life of vitality. You deserve a life of success. You deserve the life of your dreams. Take action today. You've got this." We're having fun with Holly Jean Jackson and her book, Inspiration Contagions. It's in the carousel. We also share a love of backpacking. We talked about sleep. Got my hammock. Got my sleep. I've got my. I want to pull this out of the bag because this is my. This is my. I have to. This actually travels with my hammock. I can get it actually out of the bag here.
I have a different one, Scott. Mine's like a Tempur-Pedic travel one, and I
Oh,
use
yeah.
it when I'm camping and when I'm traveling. When I'm backpacking, it's like one of those blow up ones. So
Yeah, this one's one of those it's a
nice.
supposedly this is self-inflating, and I tell you, when you get into the hammock and you have this pillow, oh my gosh, ooh,
Pretty
that's all you need.
magical.
So,
Yeah.
I can take that 10-minute nap and, clear out the brain poop.
Soak up some vitamin D, get some
Soak up some
self-care.
vitamin D, right?
Yeah.
Let's see. So sleeping, yeah. Uh, I use a good camping pad. I use my Thermarest pad that I have used forever. It's the same brand as my pillow, and so getting rest and um, taking care of yourself that way. But one of the other things that you talk about also is body image. So we're talking about self talk, and that's a lot of our mental processes. But there's also the physical self because we are physical beings as well. So talk a little bit about some of the traps that we can get into uh, with our body image.
Oh, we could talk forever about this, but just briefly. And this is something, I still struggle with this. I used to have bulimia, and I still, like, I don't have a scale at home because I get fixated on the numbers. And it took me a long time to believe that I was beautiful, which people that see me are like, you're crazy. But that's what self talk does when it's
Mhm.
not accurate. And so we live in a time and a day and age where it's difficult to really be in love with our bodies. There's so much pressure on social media, and there's a specific image that doesn't fit the majority of the healthy population, right?
Mhm.
So for example, I have like bigger bones. I have a swimmer's body. So it's not like I'm super petite in my shoulders. And for me, that made me feel like I was big or,
Mm.
fat or overweight. And then also, I was in a fairly mentally abusive relationship for a number of years. So it took a long time to kind of undo the damage of that. But doing affirmation work, working with my therapist, working with my life coach, and doing the work on it helps. And it is this ongoing thing, but it starts by figuring out something you do love about yourself and your body. And if you
Mm.
can't find anything physically, it's like, I'm grateful for my body because it allows me to live. It allows me to travel. It allows me to do my job. It allows me to be a parent. So start with something you do believe and start to expand that into something even better over time. And it is a journey, but there are very specific tools that will help you along that journey.
There was some research that said attractive people are more successful, and I thought, rats. But here was the good news because I mean we are who we are, right? We've got some control over things, but we are who we are. But here was the second research that I thought was fascinating. Confident people are more attractive. And so instead of A equals B and B equals C, then confident people are more successful. And so our image, we are who we are. Uh, and we can accept that. We can do what we can about, and we'll talk about diet. I want to talk about diet before we wind down here. But there's things that we can do, exercise, and diet, um, but accepting who we are and saying, you know what, I have value to add. I can help people out. I solve people's problems, and you can do that confidently. And if you believe that, you will be more attractive to other people regardless of the way you were built, what you were given. And
Yeah.
that is really really important for people to remember. You have control over your level of confidence.
Well, and real quick, I have to say this because I don't really believe that there's an ugly person out there. But let me tell you this. If you think you're ugly or unattractive, I have met so many people that were beautiful, but you get to know them, and what they have on the
Mhm.
inside is so unattractive that they become hideous. And then
Mhm.
you have people that are just kind of average, right? Like, they're not something you'd be like, oh, they're beautiful and glamorous. They're just kind of average. But you get to know them, and they have the
Mhm.
best like values and the biggest heart. And to me, those people become so much more gorgeous and attractive and beautiful because of who they are. So even if you're struggling with this, you don't think you're attractive or whatever, owning who you are and loving yourself and then doing that passion you're called to do matters way more than anything else. And if you do that, nobody's going to think you're ugly or unattractive ever. I guarantee it.
That's perfect. Holly, you've got great words. As we're just talking about Holly's book, Inspiration Contagion. It's in the carousel. Click on it, buy it, send it to a friend, be the hero. As we're starting to wind down here, Holly, I have, because we do share backpacking. I've got my jet boil in here. This thing has traveled with me uh, on a lot of miles. I actually take it, I've taken it backpacking. I'll take it car camping, or actually just when
Yeah.
we're on a trip, because there's so many ways to be able to use that. And
Or if you're stuck in a snowstorm and your power goes out.
yeah, to be able to heat some water, some soup, or something, right? I
Some
mean,
coffee.
it's amazing. I've made a lot of coffee uh, in rest areas, using my little jet boil and cooking some coffee and just enjoying the journey. But you talk about food, because we talked about your self talk. We talk about self image, your physical image, your body, um, and we talked about sleep. What about food? And let's maybe we can kind of combine food and exercise, because I've got I've got the I also have trekking poles in there, because of
Get in movement.
all the tools that we've used backpacking, because for 25, 30 years, backpacking with a lot of the same people, and fads come and go. But boy, I tell you what, trekking poles were the one thing that we all, when they came out, one person got them, and it was like the next season, we all had them.
Yeah.
Because it took a lot of stress off knees going downhill. It helped keep balance when you're going over rocky terrain. So there's different, and I love the example there, because of these different things like tools, um, flashlights and pocket knives and different things that you can take with you on backpacking. But you have, specifically in chapter 7 in your book, you've got some specific tools, and you also talk about movement and food. Let's lump all of these things together.
Yeah. So you guys are getting the teaser Cliff Notes version of food and movement, which obviously are important. So you
Yes.
should grab a copy of the book so you can dive into that. So in terms of food, I'm not being overly prescriptive on a diet because I don't think that that's healthy. We have very unique
Mhm.
bodies and unique needs. So the book has a couple of different tools you can use. One of them is an experiment for you to figure out the best form of protein for your body. Some people they do really well with vegetable protein, some people do well with meat, some people do well with fish protein. So you want to experiment with what fuels your body best.
Mhm.
So don't get super in the weeds on that. It's just meant for you to get curious and figure out how you energize your body best. The other thing too, stepping back from just diet, is how we eat when we eat. So a lot of us, we eat stressed out. We eat rushing to the next meeting. We eat on a clock. The brain and the body don't know how to process if they're full for 20 minutes or more. So what this
Mhm.
means is you're likely overeating if you're eating your meal in 10 minutes or especially 5, because you have no idea when you're full, because your
Right.
brain can't even process where it is. It can't check in with your gut to say, "Oh, I have enough food." So if you're trying to lose weight or you're just trying to be healthier when you're eating, you want to, one, slow down your eating to 20 minutes, but also try not to be stressed out when you start eating. So if you can just use some of the self-care stress management tools before you eat your meal, you're going to be able to better digest and get access of the nutrients you are absorbing into your system. When you eat with stress, you're likely to eat higher calories, eat more unhealthy foods, and your body's not going to be able to process that, and it creates inflammation in the gut, which is never good. So that's the food
Mhm.
side in a nutshell,
Yeah.
Cliff Notes.
Yeah.
Movement. is another thing people get hung up on. Oh, go ahead.
One of the things I wanna say about food was you have a phrase in there that I had never heard before, and it's actually a concept that was new to me, and it's focus on the meal.
Yes. Yeah, so that's the other thing. People will eat a meal and they will be having a heavy conversation that creates stress, or they'll be watching a stressful show, or they'll be doing all these other things. And when you
Or any
do
show,
that, yeah,
just
or anything
watching, yeah,
really,
just
or
yeah.
even reading, just have a
Mhm.
meal. Just like really try to enjoy. People don't do this. We're so multitasking and we're so rushed.
Yeah.
I challenge you just to eat your meal and appreciate the meal and taste it and enjoy it and just be in community with the people you're eating with. It
Mhm.
will completely transform your meal and how you digest your food. So movement. Since we're talking about those trekking poles, we're talking about being active and having tools.
Yeah.
I don't like to talk about just exercise because some people have this negative connotation with exercise. The key is our bodies are meant to move. And since we
Mm,
don't live back in caveman times, we're not hunting our food down. We have to figure out different ways of movement that we enjoy to make sure we're keeping our bodies healthy and we're not losing mobility, we're not losing muscle, because when we do this after the age of 50, if you fall and break something, you actually increase your mortality rate significantly because you don't
mhm.
recover as fast when you're older. So if you can keep your muscle density high, and this is more difficult as you age, you protect your bones as well. You protect keeping that mortality rate lower. But essentially, when we stop using the tools that our body gives us, we lose them. Just like you stop using a foreign language, you lose it if you don't use it. So just move your body,
Indeed.
whether that's dance or walking, right?
You know, the research that they've done on the astronauts when they go up, even low level, and, it's really hours. It's they can measure in hours from
Yep.
the time that they go up into space into that weightless environment where their muscles start to atrophy. It's a crazy phenomenon, but it's one that we can apply directly to our lives and follow your suggestions here in the book.
Yeah. Yeah. So have fun with it. Movement, exercise doesn't have to be this hard thing. You know, it could be dancing while your family's cleaning the dishes. It could
Mhm.
be walking up and down the stairs. It could be going on a walk with a friend. Make it fun. Don't make it this chore.
Yeah. It says, we've been having fun here. We're winding down with Holly Jean Jackson, author of Inspiration Contagion: Health Secrets for Raving Success. And I don't think that we use the word raving in a positive sense enough. I think we need to use it more.
Well, I mean, this book is meant to kind of put things, make you think, right? It's kind of meant to put like contagion during a pandemic.
It's a
Well, yeah,
contagion, yes.
I want to spread
And you
inspiration,
started the
light, and hope.
podcast. When did you start your podcast?
I started it in June of 2020, so right in the
Well, there you go.
beginning of the
Okay. There
pandemic.
you
It was
go.
intentional. Like the name is very intentional.
Mhm. I love
Yeah.
it. It's highlighted there in the carousel as well, or it's in the carousel. People can add it. And gosh, I was just thinking one of those things, and I am going to pull it out. I'm gonna pull out the ukulele. Now, you may not travel, you may not backpack with music, but I'll tell you what, it's lightweight. It works. I think it's in tune, mostly in tune. This is the great thing. Um, there are things in our lives that have impact in ways that we don't understand, and music is one of those things. Um, and so when you're talking about self-care, self-image, self-talk, these are things that are hard to measure. Just like, any kind of beauty, if you look at a particular bit of art, um, or you hear music, or you hear a story, there are things that affect us at levels where we have no capacity for language. That is, they hit us at an emotional level. And I just encourage everyone, get a copy of Inspiration Contagion. It's not it's not just a book about stories of Holly's life, which are in there and are fascinating. Um, but I guarantee that you'll be able to relate to these on some level, and there is positive steps that you can take to be better at who you are. And not talking about changing who you are, but just talking about refining who you are. It was Michelangelo that was asked how he was able to create the beautiful statues in marble. And he said, "It's easy. I just take away the part that is not the man." And so I think there's a lot of junk hanging onto our lives that are not us. And get Holly's book and read it, share it, buy copies for your friends. Uh, there is great practical advice. As I said at the beginning, this is more of a manual. Uh, you'll want to be able. You can go through it at different points. If food is your issue, if exercise is your issue, if self talk is your issue, dog tag the chapters. Dog ear the chapters, and get there. Holly, as we just wind down, put that back. But how can people get a hold of you? Because you've got a lot of stuff going on, but maybe people want to hire you as their coach. They want you to come and speak to their groups, get involved in one of your courses, or buy bulk copies of your book to give out to all of their 10,000 employees. How do people get a hold of you?
Love it, Scott. Love that vision because we want to spread inspiration like a contagion and like wildfire. So if you found this inspiring, you want to get a hold of me for any of the things Scott just mentioned, you can send me an email at holly@hollyjeanjackson.com. You can check out more things about me on my website, which is hollyjeanjackson.com. You can also send me a message on LinkedIn. It's Holly J. Jackson on LinkedIn. I would love to hear from you. I'd love to hear what you think of the book. If you're interested in working with me as a speaker, working with your company, working with you as a coach, happy to have that conversation. I'd love to hear how this has affected you in a positive way. And by all means, help us try to spread more inspiration during this really dark and difficult time in the world.
That's perfect. And for everybody, if you didn't have a pencil or pen handy when Holly was giving those out, a really easy thing to do is to click on the book in the carousel and hit the buy with one click because all of the contact information is in the
In the
book.
back.
It's in the back. Isn't that
Yeah.
this is so perfect? It's all right
Yeah. It's all there.
there. Hey, Holly, hang out in the green room for just a moment. We're going to wind this one down, but thank you for coming and joining me here on Amazon Live. It's been a lot of fun. Just talking about backpacking as well. It's cold here, and I do not have a desire to go winter camping, and
Me
so
either.
uh,
Me either.
it's fun to just go vicariously through it. In fact, I've got my uh, high alpine. I love high alpine meadows. That's some of my favorite place to go, and so
It's
I've got
time to
my
start planning
never
your
know.
trips for the summer and the spring for backpacking. So
Last
build the
year
list.
last year, a friend of mine did the Wonderland Trail. A couple of friends of mine did the whole
Mm.
Wonderland Trail. That's all around Mount Rainier. I think it's a 9-day journey. It's a long trip, and it takes a lot of planning. Anyway, another story. Holly, thanks for coming on here. I'm gonna send you out, and we're gonna wind this one down.
Thanks.
Hey, I'm going to put this back up so you can just see inspiration, contagion, health secrets for raving success. Holly Jean Jackson has written this book. Um, Definitely get a copy of it and read it. You'll enjoy it. It will be helpful and beneficial for you. And I am certain that you know of somebody that could also benefit from a copy of this. So when you're in Amazon, when you're on the cart, buy a couple of copies, but you can choose where to send it to. So just put their address in, send it to them, be the hero. Always, books make great broadcasts, make great gifts here on the broadcast. All right, signing off for today, and I'm just going to put this back up. I want to wish everybody a fabulous day. Thanks for joining in.